The story begins with an average salaryman who plays his favorite video game, but as he leaves his apartment, he suddenly suffers a heart attack and he ends up dying. He wakes up in a strange room where he's surprised to see a flying dog, and he realizes that he's been reincarnated into another world as a boy named Ars Luvent. He starts studying at a young age, realizing that he's living in the Summer Fourth Continent, which used to be divided into 7 kingdoms. But the kingdom of Ansel united the land and established the Summer Fourth Empire. He learns about the existence of magic in that world and realizes that he's a member of a noble family which rules a small region called Lamberg. He's happy that he has everything he needs because the servants are looking after him, and he visits the barracks where he watches the soldiers as they train. He sees a soldier named Melis struggling, so he uses his unique appraisal ability, which allows him to see Melis's stats. He learns that Melis has no talent with the spear, but he has potential as an archer, so Ars advises him to use a bow, but he refuses, saying only cowards fight from a distance, but Ars insists, so the soldiers tell him to give it a try. He reveals that he has never used a bow before, but Ars tells him to go for it, and he ends up hitting the target in his first attempt. The soldiers can't believe this, thinking he just got lucky, so they tell him to try again, but he keeps hitting the target with incredible precision. So they recognize his skills, thinking he will become an excellent archer, and they wonder how Ars learned about his talent. But Ars doesn't want to tell anyone about his ability, thinking they won't believe him because he's the only one who can use it, so he tells them it was just his instinct. He starts thinking about his ability as he looks at the mirror, trying to check his own stats, but he realizes that he can't, so he concludes that it only works on other people. While having dinner with his family, his father Raven is impressed that he was able to discover Melissa's talent. We learn that Raven used to be a commoner, but he rose to power because of his amazing combat skills, and Ars checks his stats, realizing that he's the greatest warrior in the land. He tells Ars to focus on his instincts, thinking it's going to be useful when he becomes the ruler, and he realizes that he needs to prepare for his future. So Ars starts studying about the Empire, but he realizes that the future is going to be chaotic because the rulers are corrupt and the peasants are revolting. He's afraid that the Empire is on the brink of war, so he needs to learn how to lead his forces in battle, but he knows that he lacks combat skills, so he isn't sure if he can protect his people. He thinks his ability might be able to help him, so he walks around the village, trying to look for the perfect soldier. But he realizes that everyone lacks talent, and he becomes exhausted because his ability strains his eyes. He suddenly sees a boy named Reitz as he gets kicked out of a shop, and everyone looks down on him because he's from an inferior race called the Mockans. Ars gives him food, and he starts eating as Ars checks his stats, and he's completely stunned because it's absolutely insane. Reitz is about to leave, but Ars follows him, inviting him to become his retainer because Ars wants to gather the cream of the crop so that he can strengthen his army. Reitz doesn't believe him, thinking he wants to play a game, but he explains that he's a noble, showing Reitz the Luvent family crest and telling him that he has immense potential. But he thinks he's going to cause trouble for Ars because everyone hates Mockans, so he declines, and he starts walking away. But Ars refuses to give up, telling Reitz that he can eat as much as he wants if he becomes a retainer, so he ends up changing his mind. They enter the Luvent mansion, where the servants give Ars his food, but they give Reitz a simple meal, thinking that's all he deserves. So Ars realizes that they hate Mockans, thinking he can't talk them out of it, so he sits beside Reitz and shares his food with him. The servants are shocked by this behavior, but Ars tells them that Reitz is his honored guest, so they start treating him well, and Ars asks him what he was doing in the village. So he reveals that he used to work as a mercenary, but his companions died in battle, so he started wandering alone, and he ended up in the village. He explains that he tried to join the other mercenaries, but they shunned him because he was just a child, so they thought he wasn't a capable fighter. One of the servants interrupts them, saying it's time for Reitz to leave, but Ars explains that Reitz is going to become his retainer, so the servant absolutely loses it. Raven learns about this, so he calls Ars, telling him that a Malkin wouldn't make a good retainer, but he explains that Reitz has incredible potential, saying it would be a waste to let him go. But Raven doesn't believe this, reminding Ars that Mockans are inferior beings, but he explains that he believes in Reitz's talent, telling Raven to test his abilities. Raven recalls that he was able to discover Melissa's talent, so he decides to give Reitz a chance, promising to hire him as a soldier if he passes the test. Ars is happy to hear this, but Raven explains that Reitz will have a mock duel with him, so Ars becomes nervous, telling him that Reitz is only 14, so he still hasn't reached his full potential. Ars checks their stats, and he realizes that it's not even close, but his father explains he will go easy on him, so Ars thinks he might stand a chance. They make their way to the barracks, but Reitz wonders why Ars wants him as a retainer, because he's being persecuted wherever he goes. But Ars explains that he needs Reitz's help, saying he's going to become the lord of the land, so he needs someone capable of leading his army. They reach the barracks, where Raven prepares to fight, ordering Reitz to take a sword, and he explains that Reitz will win if he manages to land a blow before the timer runs out. Raven charges in, and Reitz struggles to defend himself, as Raven continues to pressure him. Ars thinks he's in trouble, but the soldiers are impressed, because he's able to keep up with Raven, who has a reputation for crushing soldiers in an instant. He manages to land a hit, knocking Reitz down, and Raven tells him he's running out of time, but he refuses to give up, realizing that Ars is counting on him, so he decides to fight seriously. He charges at Raven, who tries to stop him, but the light blinds him, and he barely manages to block Reitz's attack. Everyone can't believe this, and Raven admits that he lost, because the attack grazed him, so he decides to hire Reitz as a soldier. Ars thanks his father for giving Reitz a chance, and Raven admits that he has talent, thinking he will become a great swordsman. Raven reveals that he was worried about his son's future, but he believes Ars is going to become a great man, because he has the power to recognize people's talents, and the soldiers praise Reitz, realizing he's an excellent fighter. After some time, we see Reitz wearing his uniform, as he accompanies Ars, who wonders why he's taking on servant duties, so he explains that he wants to help as much as he can. He reveals that he always dreamed of serving a lord, knowing he would have died if Ars didn't take him in, so he wants to spend the rest of his life serving him. After a few months, Reitz has been accepted by everyone, and he even receives tutoring, which further increases his ingenuity stat, making him one of the most knowledgeable people in the house. He gives Ars a lesson about the Summerforth Empire, mentioning how the Ansel Kingdom was able to conquer the other 6 kingdoms over 200 years ago, but the empire is now in a dire situation, because the current ruler Bydris is just a child, and his power is held by his retainers, who are involved in factional rivalries, causing the central authority to be corroded, leading to more revolts and governors that defy the crown. Ars thinks that the conflicts will only continue to grow, so he must prepare and gather the most talented people to his side. He wonders where the next conflict might be, and Reitz mentions their province of Missian, because the governor is old and in poor health, so there's a high chance he will die in the next few years. He has 2 sons, but hasn't decided on who will succeed him. They both seem to want the position, so there's likely to be a war. Ars wonders who his father would side with, and Reitz thinks it would be the older brother, since it's his right to succeed. But Reitz also notes that it's not up to Raven to decide, since he doesn't directly serve the governor. We learn that each province is divided up into districts, and Lamberg is part of the Canair district, which is within Missian, so Raven serves the head of Canair. Ars worries about what would happen if his father were on the losing side, but Reitz thinks this is their opportunity, because performing well during a major conflict can help a lord advance in the world, and Reitz thinks they need to recruit more people to get stronger. They head out, and they see Raven, as Ars notes he has been spending more time training, so he also knows that war is coming. Ars mentions they are headed to the town to find more recruits, and his father suggests finding someone who has the talent for magic, because magic would be invaluable in the battles to come. We see that Ars once tried to learn magic, but he quickly realized that he had no aptitude for it. They make it to the capital city in Canair, and Ars is amazed to see so many people. Reitz notes that there are around 50 times more people than Lamberg, and the Pyre House rules the district. Ars notices how everyone looks wealthy, wishing the people of Lamberg could also be like this, and Reitz thinks they will be able to find someone with potential since there are so many people. Ars starts looking around with his appraisal, but after some time, there's no one that has caught his eye. They decide to keep looking, but Ars notices an alley where all the homeless are gathered. Ars wants to help them, but Reitz thinks there's nothing they can do in their current position. Ars thinks about how he thought the town was amazing, but thinks he wants to create a place where even those who are less fortunate can make a life for themselves, and Reitz is glad to be serving him. They reach the market, and Ars is amazed looking at all the different foods. A man offers to sell him a dragon egg, and Ars immediately imagines having a dragon as a pet. He decides to buy 3 of them, but Reitz suddenly points his blade at the man, accusing him of being a scammer. The man says he's legit, but Reitz knows that trade with the northern continent was frozen, so it's impossible for him to have dragon eggs. He prepares to end the man for his lies, but Ars holds him back, as the people start to stare at them. Reitz apologizes for his outburst, but Ars thanks him for looking out for him. They have a break for lunch, and Ars notices a candy stall, so he rushes over to try it, but he suddenly gets bumped into, and he realizes he was robbed. Reitz goes after them, and he manages to grab their cloak, revealing them to be a girl. She turns a corner, but she's surrounded by some thugs who start beating her. Ars tells them to stop, and one of the men attack him, but Reitz stops him, taking him out with a single punch. He easily deals with the other 2 men, and they all stumble away, saying it's not over. Ars checks on the girl, but he's amazed when he sees her stats. He learns her name is Charlotte, and he sees that she has S-tier aptitude for magic, as well as insanely high stats for leadership and prowess. Reitz asks for Ars's coin pouch back, but Ars suddenly asks her to be his retainer. Reitz thinks she's just a thief, but Ars mentions her talent for magic, and Charlotte refuses to serve a child like him, saying she has never even used magic before. Ars becomes desperate to convince her, thinking she's stealing because she has a hard life, so he mentions how he will give her food and a salary, but she just thinks he's a spoiled rich noble. She thinks he doesn't deserve his privilege, thinking he was just lucky to be born a noble. She refuses to become a tool for him, but Ars swears he's different, mentioning how he wants to someday create a place where everyone has an opportunity, but Charlotte mentions how they can't wait for someday to come, because every day is a struggle for them. Reitz understands her, but still demands for her to return the coin pouch. Charlotte gives it back since they saved her, and Ars asks her about the men, so she explains they were the men of a slave trader. She was caught stealing from a noble, so she was sold off as a slave. She managed to escape from the slave trader, but they then sent the men after her. Ars wonders why she stayed in the town after escaping, but we see a bunch of children that rush up to her, and she explains how she couldn't just leave them behind. Ars agrees not to recruit her, but he decides to give her his money anyway. At night, Ars continues to think about her, and Reitz notes how he was in a similar situation as her, so he understands how she feels. He thinks she must have been treated terribly by nobles in the past, and she must see everyone as an enemy, but he tells Ars he's different. He thinks about the flaw behind his plan to create a better place, but at that moment, they hear the kids from earlier calling for Charlotte. Ars rushes down and asks them what's going on, so they tell him that Charlotte was taken, but that's where this video ends. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of this series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see